Hey everybody, I'm back again, Waifu Belector, the only fair human on earth, and it's time to talk about Avowed, the new fantasy RPG from Obsidian Entertainment, and really the first big noteworthy game to release this year. I know that's kinda weird because it's late February, but this year has been slow to get the ball rolling. There is an absolute heap of games set to come out around mid-year though, and some huge monumental drops after that, so luckily these early months are not indicative of all of 2025. But anyway, Avowed, Obsidian's latest release and their first big Western style RPG since The Outer Worlds in 2019. I've played it, I've had my time with it, and now I'm gonna let you know what's good about it, what's bad about it, and what are just the indifferent facts about it. Remember to give this video a like if you end up enjoying and consider subscribing. Alright, let's go. And I guess the best place to begin is in the beginning. And in the beginning, God created the heavens and the... No, I'm kidding, seriously. In the beginning of this game, Obsidian really wants to show you what they've got, both visually and in terms of polish. So you'll find a lot of cliff sides to stand on with sprawling open environments, and they do look good. Avowed isn't the most graphically impressive game by any measure, but it has a nice art style, it's very vibrant and colorful, and everything's very well polished. Outside of just showing off the environment, the game opens with a good, competent tutorial level. And because a tutorial level introduces all the basics, this is where you get introduced to what may be the most pivotal part of this game, its combat. Very early on, it's communicated through gameplay that this game's combat is a little different than you may know from other Western style RPGs. And that is because it's a little bit challenging. Combat encounters are not something you do kinda half asleep on autopilot. This game's combat kinda keeps you on your toes. The combat in Avowed is not the completely brain dead combat of something like Skyrim or even their own The Outer Worlds. Not that brain dead combat in an RPG is inherently bad. There's definitely a value and an appeal to being able to turn off your brain and enjoy something. An underrated appeal these days, honestly. But anyway, Avowed chooses to set itself apart by being more frenetic during action, but also more deliberate where combat encounters are. I know Avowed is set in the same universe as the Pillars of Eternity games, and I never played those, but I'm aware that they're very Baldur's Gate style games, and some of those sensibilities are present here in Avowed. The idea of making combat encounters fairly tough, but on the design side being very deliberate and aware of where you put them, that kind of stuff is here, that ethos is here. Of course, this is a different style game, so ultimately everything's a little bit looser, but you can definitely feel the thought that goes into just about every fight, and even where those enemies are standing in the open world. I played this on the normal difficulty, and don't get me wrong, I say this game has some challenge, but this isn't Dark Souls or anything. You just won't be holding the trigger with your eyes closed until everything's dead. You'll be dodging, defending, prioritizing, and you'll be kept on your toes probably up until you get a good rhythmic combination of weapons and abilities that put you in a very satisfying, well-earned combative autopilot. The way good RPGs should be, honestly. And what I'm about to say kind of ties into the thought out combat encounters, but fights are usually pretty decently rewarding too. Sometimes you get a whole lot of hot garbage, but sometimes also you're greatly over rewarded for your efforts, or lack thereof. And that's a great feeling when it happens. So rewards can be a bit of a crapshoot, but most of the time you're getting something decent. And this is true of just general exploration as well. If you see something interesting or just decide to stumble off into a random direction, you're typically decently rewarded for it. And often, if it's not a full or formal side quest commissioned by some whining NPC, then it usually doesn't take long to resolve whatever thing you've stumbled on. So exploration feels worth doing and dealt out in these kinda bite-sized portions. Now, speaking of side quests, I think there are some really good ones. And I think the writing in this game overall is good. A lot of the side quests create compelling scenarios that really get you invested and make you want to see the resolution. And sometimes the decision you need to make for the quest giver is not what you want to do in the moment. So you kind of have to weigh out what you want to do and who you want to make mad, that kind of thing, you know? And I'll say, this game is really good at generating what seem like impossible decisions to make. Like the kind of thing you'd expect in a purely choice-driven graphic adventure game like Life is Strange or Detroit. But they've got quite a few tough choices here in Avowed. Choices I hated making in the moment, but I'm so happy the game made me make. Now here's the thing, all of the good stuff I've talked about up to this point, with the exception of the combat maybe, it doesn't feel like this the entire game. It doesn't all come together super well the whole time. Avowed is not operating at peak performance for its full duration. Very early on, around hours 1 through 4, the game feels incredibly promising. Decently intriguing lore stuff, nice environments. It's like up-to-date Skyrim with better combat. Seems like it's gonna be absolutely incredible. However, then maybe around hour 10 or so, you're familiar with everything, you've seen how the game works, and it's all pretty standard as it turns out. The game still has its combat to its name, but other than that, there isn't a lot that makes it especially different from other games of its ilk, seemingly. There's even some frustration as you transition into fighting higher gear enemies, and the game kinda just isn't providing you with the tools to obtain higher gear yourself. I believe it's supposed to be some kind of challenge check, but as I said, it just feels frustrating. But then, later in the game, maybe starting at hour 15 or so, all the way to the end, it's like Avowed figured itself out. Like Obsidian knew exactly what they wanted to do by this point. Like they knew what works and what doesn't in other games like this. Because the game goes into enjoyment high gear. Yes, it still is mostly familiar and what you expect from Western RPGs, but it's refined and fine-tuned. And you really come to appreciate and recognize the meticulous approach influenced by Pillars of Eternity and Baldur's Gate that I mentioned earlier, because the game hits such a stride and benefits from it so heavily by this point. Also, before this latter portion of the game, your decisions feel mostly inconsequential. What you say or do doesn't appear to have any profound effect on events the majority of the time. But then suddenly, everyone starts to bring up things you've done. Back to back to back, characters start reminding you and reacting accordingly to things you've done in a way that really isn't telegraphed beforehand, and I like that. In an argument I was having with the character, they even used something I'd done way earlier on as a reason why I was being hypocritical, and that genuinely influenced my decision. So yeah, to me, the beginning of Avowed is very promising and stunning, but the awe seems to peter out mid-game for what just seems like more of something we've had, only for the game to show you that it isn't just what was, but rather it's a proper step forward for the genre. It's a bit of a bumpy road, but one that hits in a lot of the right ways, and I came away from having greatly enjoyed it. If I had to put a number on it, I'd say a soft 8 out of 10 feels right. I think it just barely makes it into that 8 category, but it is there for me. And I'm happy about it. On this channel, I had my worries about this game. When it wasn't looking so good early on, I said so. When it started looking better in later trailers, I said so. And going into it, I can't say I had a ton of faith after The Outer Worlds was the Earth's okayest game ever, but I'm glad to have played a great game here with Avowed. But I think that's all. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please remember to give this video a like and maybe even subscribe if you liked it that much. But even if you don't, thanks for watching, and also leave your comments if you've played Avowed. What did you think of it? I'm sure you'll let me know how stupid and wrong I am about it, but what else are the comments for? If you haven't played Avowed, it's on Xbox Game Pass, and I encourage you to give it a try. That's all from me though, so until next time, I am Waifu Belector. I am just a normal guy. I like hentai, and I like Avowed. Goodbye.